Hello there. So this is going to be a talk that I gave at GDC and then Develop Brighton in 2023. If you saw it at GDC or you've seen it in the vault, it is the same talk, so maybe don't bother. If you saw it in Brighton, it's got a tools section, an extra section, which is about 5 minutes long. I'll put a timestamp in the description so you can go straight to it. But there, otherwise it's the same talk, so don't bother. Today I'm just going to be giving it to my flat. I will do it in one take like it's a real talk because I can't be bothered to do any video editing. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hi, welcome to my talk. My name is Jacob Mills and I am Senior Level Designer at Roll7, most notoriously on Rollerdrome, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. The talk is titled Closing the Gap, Chasing Effective Level Design Processes for a New Genre in Rollerdrome. I did amalgamate the two titles from the two conferences. So anyway, first, a super short summary of my entire life history. Hi, I'm Jacob. I did a programming-heavy university course, which included a year-long tech-heavy placement. I was a professional programmer for all of about 3 months before hopping into design at TT and never looking back. Worked as a designer on a bunch of Lego games, a bunch of Ubisoft games, and then landed here at Roll7 on Rollerdrome. What is Rollerdrome? If you're not familiar, Rollerdrome is a blended genre skater shooter. You complete levels by killing guys, like in a shooter, and you do tricks, like in a skater. It's got this beautiful graphic novel art style, it's got this soundtrack of absolute banging tunes, it is fast, it is frenetic, it can be really hard, it can be really quite demanding, but it is so fun and so fluid, if it resonates with you, it is really satisfying to play. So if you like action games, please do check out our video game. Cool. Hope that's got you all pumped, but what does this talk about? First, I will introduce the state of the game as it was when I joined the team. The bulk of the talk will then be a series of mini-level postmortems, focusing on key parts of the process, what worked, what didn't. Hopefully we will identify some lessons that you can learn from my mistakes. Very broadly, the topics we will cover are the joys of working in a new genre, receiving and actioning feedback, building these levels and the power of effective tools, and then the sleep paralysis demon, which is design block. It's a grab bag of design topics, so there should be something in there which is relatable and relevant to you, and those key takeaways are what we will review at the end. So let's dive into that intro. As I was saying earlier, the final product is an intense experience, and a lot of that intensity is driven by core gameplay loops that were already locked in place when I joined the team back in January 2021. So all the way back then, on the shooter side, as I said earlier, you kill all the enemies to beat the level, like a shooter. Kills drop health pickups, so you're incentivized to push forward and pick up those little green diamonds. And there are a variety of weapons, a variety of enemies. These are in various stages of development, but the broad idea is different tools for different jobs, right? On the skater side, you do tricks. Tricks increase your score. Doing a variety of tricks increases the rate at which you gain that score. And finally, the tricks restore the ammo in your weapons. Now, that last one is the thing that marries the two genres together, but if we just ignore that for now and inspect these other elements individually, what comes to mind? When we get down to brass tacks, Rollerdrome at its core could be described as Doom on skates. But if we gather all these elements up, these kind of are the key ingredients that are making Rollerdrome feel good early on already as a prototype. But what about the levels, I hear you ask? Sure, but first a quick primer on some words I'm going to be throwing around a lot. This is Kara Hassan, the player character. This is a ramp. When Kara launches off the ramp, she gets what we in the biz call big air. Sorry, I'm not a skater. Anyway, yeah, that's a ramp. This is a roller. Rollers are a type of smooth ramp that you can smoothly roll up and over. This is a quarter pipe. You might recognize it as half of a half pipe. Kara goes up, she comes back down, and she can grind along the edge of them. And this is a fun box. Fun boxes are any island formed of any combination of any of these elements. So if we look at O1 Arena being the dev name, where it's the first level in the game, O1, and it's set in the arena biome, O1 Arena. If we look at this level, you can see it is surrounded by quarter pipes on all sides. It's got this cheeky roller ramp over there to get into the side bit, and it's got this fun box in the middle that's essentially just this circular ramp thing. Okay, cool, all on the same page. When I joined the team, there had been a lot of exploration and experimentation into how the levels were going to be played, and the direction was really solidifying. First things first, heading into production, we know this is going to be an arena shooter. You're not getting from A to B, you've got all these cool movement options, but it's not a platformer. You're going to be locked in these arenas just murdering guys. there are already a few core pillars established for the levels, which I can summarize here, really boil them down, as keep Kara moving and encourage player choice. For keep Kara moving, this mostly means minimizing snags. If we look at O1 Arena again, we can see it's exceedingly smooth and round. There are as few steps, corners, or walls as possible to prevent Kara getting caught or stuck in them. And enabling player choice can be a matter as simple as just properly spacing these elements. There's already metrics established for this, namely leaving at least 13 meters of space between quarter pipes and ramps, which is enough time to decide whether to go for that aforementioned big air, or head around the side and take out some enemy, or dodge some incoming attack. It's about giving players breathing room in the layout itself so that they have time to make decisions. They're not locked into any one path. The game isn't playing itself. In terms of setting, at this point, there are 4 biomes planned: Arena, Mountain, Canyon, and Mall. And the team had just passed Greenlight, so they already had these 2 Arena levels built already, and it's pretty good shape. They were doing investigations into the look of the Mall. The game already looked pretty sick in general, and the gameplay was in a really good spot. So I was pumped to get started working on such a slick, stylish game. So let's dive in there, working in a new genre. Excuse me. Now at this point, Vertical Slice was approaching, ooh, and after a little time to settle in, I was given my first task, 07 Mountain. So again, that's the 7th level in the game, this time Mountain biome. Now, as I said, this is my first task, so they start me off easy. Paul, the creative director, has already made this first draft grey box. All I have to do really is clean it up, ready for the artist to take and finalize for Vertical Slice. It's the team's first crack at a mountain biome level, so the concept was already in progress. It had this really strong identity with these 3 separate islands, this tower in the corner as a landmark, and a cheeky interior under one of the islands, which was required for a GIF moment, which are these key gameplay moments that we wanted to recreate so that the final product would live up to the initial promise of Paul's viral tweets. This game literally got picked up by Roll7 because of how rad these GIFs looked, and the studio was really keen to deliver on that initial promise, right? We can take these points and treat them as the basic spec, and of course I had a bunch of initial thoughts about this space. Not to dunk on Paul too harshly, but the entrance is pretty boring. It's this short, straight line, no grand reveal, and it's really enclosed by these high walls, right? In fact, the whole level felt pretty enclosed by those same high walls. And it's really boxy. You can almost feel the grid when you're in it, especially prevalent when you view it from above. It's this kind of shorn square shape. The level's pretty flat in general, which felt like a missed opportunity, both for the mountain setting and verticality is just one of those level design easy wins that lives in my head rent-free. And despite being enclosed by those high walls, the layout feels so open, there's nowhere to hide. After years of working on a cover shooter, these sightlines everywhere just made me feel really uneasy. Now if we grab these 4 points, this looked like a pretty good angle of attack to amp up the mountain feel of the level without messing too much with the key requirements. So I'm going to grab them, we're going to treat them as my action list, and we're just going to go through them one by one and tick them off. So first things first, the entrance. I stole this ski slope from someone else's grey box, and I mean I stole it. I'm new, I'm still getting used to the tools, it looks like a ski slope, it fits the setting, we know it works, no need to reinvent the wheel, thank you Kev. Kev is the other level designer on Rollerdrome, I will thank him every time I steal some of his work. However, I did do this pro level designer technique with this ski slope where I bent it round a corner, and that, my friends, is hashtag level design, and I will see you next year. But my point is this is the most basic form of denial and reward, right? First you can't see the level, then you can see the level. Then you can't see the level, then you can see the level. Builds anticipation, lets players get a preview of the level before they dive in, lets them form a little plan before they, start shooting. So, cool. You can also see that I've removed those walls on one side, so this already feels a lot less closed in and much more like we're on a mountainside. These are easy wins. Boring entrance and the enclosed feeling, we've solved them. We can take those 2 points and mark them as done. Level design is easy. You can also see here my early clumsy attempts at breaking the boxy feeling of the level, and I'm trying to add a little bit of extra verticality as well. I try a few things to give the level extra height, but this isn't really working. We're just kind of bloating the footprint of the space. Not really working for flow, so I try something completely different. I shift the focus on verticality to the other 2 islands. I expand that interior space so that the lower floor is the focus instead of the roof. I had this big column to break up that open space, break up some of those sightlines. And I'm attempting to give players a lot of options when it comes to transferring between these islands. But this isn't really working. We've lost some of that identity, that simplicity. Directors and leads are not vibing with this. Oh god, what's going wrong? To answer that, let's look at some ancient footage of Drew, our producer, playing this draft of the level, and watch out for these animations. Ooh, ooh, ooh. But yeah, can anyone spot what's missing? What vital component of this game is not present in this draft of the level? Where the hell are any of these guys? Where are the enemies? And by this point, it had been a few revisions, right? And directors and leads had been asking, where are the enemies? And I was like, I just really want to nail this flow first. And they'd ask why I'm even trying to introduce verticality and cover. And I'd be like, well, it incentivizes player movement. But I finally do put some enemies in, and their concerns are right. And this level is not working. But it's not like I was doing this stuff for no reason, right? I spent a lot of time as a designer getting used to blocking off sight lines or utilizing negative space in these ways to encourage movement around these levels, to encourage players to uncover hidden information or take different routes and experience the space in more interesting ways. And yes, my experience is cover shooters, but I've done my research. Even Doom utilizes cover to allow players to kite enemies, move them where they want, to create breathing room and control the pace of fights. And Rollerdrome is just Doom on skates, right? So what's going wrong? Why isn't this working for me in Rollerdrome? Why isn't it working? Why though? At this point, after joining the team, it felt like I was having to relearn the job, which felt like a really weird aha moment to have because I've done that before, quite a few times actually. So let me pull out the relevant bits from my personal experience. We'll wrap back round. It'll all make sense. Now, as I said earlier, I started in code and then hopped into design. Literally a whole new discipline. I'd done design tasks before, sure, but never professionally. I really did have to learn the job on the job. A whole new discipline, a whole new role. After becoming pretty capable and competent at designing for family-friendly puzzle platform Lego games, though, I went and worked on Rooty Tooty Loot and Shooty at Ubi. Still design work, sure, but all of a sudden pure layout and world logic were of paramount importance. Instead of designing puzzles and quests, I was laying out missions and combat encounters. Still a design role, but the job felt entirely different. Sure enough, coming from Ubisoft to Roll7 meant a similar transition from shooters to whatever the hell this game is, right? No one knows. No one's made Rollerdrome yet. We're still figuring it out. Now, changing projects or jobs can be an upheaval in all kinds of ways, but I'm focusing on these genre and discipline points because it'll happen to you. And that's my point. Every time I found myself in these situations, I've effectively had to relearn how to do the job. But over the years, having hopped between various projects, I realized that despite requirements for the individual project or genre changing quite drastically, there is one quite broad process that I have found myself following every time. So let's inspect that process. Now, I'm not saying this is groundbreaking or the right way to do things. There are no silver bullets in design. This is just what I have found myself repeatedly adhering to over the years. So I would wager that designers in the room will have found themselves doing something similar. This process really is that broad, but that kind of is the point. Anyway, the first step is research, whether that's into the IP, the genre, the gameplay, the setting. Every project I join, every level I work on, I've got to do some prep work before I dive in. And then next comes planning. This might be your paper design, your initial sketches. If you're into design docs, this is where you can use them to solve some tricky problems early on before jumping in engine. And that is stage 3, design. Actually greyboxing, translating this idea from something in your head to this actual playable space that you can interact with. But of course, level design is more than just block out, right? At this point, you should be doing at least the bare bones implementation, basic scripting, getting those interactive level elements in, or some semblance of mission flow in, for example, or throwing in some enemies, perhaps. You should be doing that at this point. After that initial design and implementation, we've got iteration, which is basically a catch-all for doing any of the prior 3 steps over and over and over again until the thing's in a decent state, and all you're doing is polishing and bug fixing, and hooray, you've made a level, congrats, woo! Okay. All we can do, the whole point of this, is that I can use this process as a framework to assess the work that I have done on this level. So, going through them point by point, I thought I'd done a pretty decent amount of research. I played Doom 2016 again, one of my favorite games of all time. And I'd made that action list, so there was definitely a plan. And then, whoa, I've messed up here. I've been trying to design this level purely with layout, not paying attention to the crucial other elements, the enemies. Shameful. But this is why it's useful to have your process formalized. You can look at it and say, okay, how do I fix this? In this case, we just recognize that we've made a screw up here in, design implementation. And so maybe it's a good time to reinspect some fundamentals. We'll go back to research. And my objective at this point is really to understand what Rollerdrome needs from its levels, what role, what purpose the levels serve in this game. And to do that, I'm going to do a 2-pronged approach. We're going to look at the role that the enemies play in the game, and then we're going to look at how the game design accommodates the genre blend. So, those enemies. At this point, there was at least a concept for every enemy type, as you see here, and they were broadly functional in the game. Most of them are going to be used in this level. Now, to try and give a quick insight, I've divvied them up into these categories, but this is by no means definitive. We've got ranged enemies, some of them shoot projectiles, some enemies do area denial, but I'm going to pick a few out to give a fuller picture. So first, this melee guy can move a little bit and whack you with a bat. Dunk. We've got Sniper, who stays on her perch and snipes you from a distance. Makes sense. And then Rocket Guy, Warhead, who also stays on his perch and shoots rockets at you, which home in and chase you. You can shoot them out of the air, or dodge them, or get exploded by them, whatever. But that's interesting. Both of those ranged enemies stay rooted to their spot, and that's by design. Which means that they can't realign and regain line of sight on Kara if she moves, right? So ranged enemies more or less require line of sight on Kara to maintain pressure on her. We want the player shooting missiles out of the air or dodging incoming shots, not hiding in a corner behind a rock. Thinking of the melee guy, this works the opposite way around as well. For the player to assess the state of play, make plans and execute them, they need line of sight on the enemies. So, okay, it's becoming clear to me now that yes, Rollerdrome is a shooter, but it's not a game about kiting enemies or ducking behind cover to block incoming fire like Doom. Counter to what I'd previously assumed, maintaining a line of sight is pretty essential here for those enemies to apply pressure, for the player to make plans. Okay, good learning. What about the game design? Remember these dweebs? The kind of key ingredient of Rollerdrome's game design? Remember this one, who I rudely shoved off to the side and told you to ignore. Tricks restore ammo. This mechanic was already in place from the very start, the very first draft of the game when it was this game jam game. And it is the core interplay between the two genres, the ebb and the flow between the skating and the shooting. But even at this early point, it's far from the only big change that has been made to the game design as a result of the genre blend. We can identify a few more just from playing, so let's do that. On the shooting side, auto-aim. The pistols, your shotgun, your bread and butter weapons, they have this hefty dose of auto-aim to help Kara land up these shots in the midst of all this frenetic action. In the same vein, reflex time. Every time you aim down sights, every time you pull the left trigger, the player gets this really generous period of bullet time slow-mo, again to help you line up these shots when the action is so hectic. And not as sexy as the other two, but there's a shared ammo pool. Use ammo or gain ammo in one of your weapons, then swap to another one. It doesn't matter. You'll have the same proportion of ammo in the clip regardless. Okay, what about the skating side? No bailing. In Tony Hawk's, if you land mid-spin or mid-trick, Tony will come off his board like a complete amateur. He'll bail. Do that with Kara, she won't stop, she won't slam, she'll just keep on going. She'll stall it out, roll, and keep on moving. She does not bail. Land however you want. In the same vein, no balance minigames. You don't have to be micro-adjusting left and right. Grind as much as you want, as long as you want. Kara is a professional. She will keep doing it for you. If we line up each of these adjustments, it's kind of clear to me that they all serve the same core purpose. We're eliminating demands on player attention that would be necessary if this was just a shooter or just a skater, but due to the genre blend, if piled on top of everything else, these would just over-encumber the cognitive load of the player, right? If I was having to line up headshots while moving at full speed, while managing all the ammo in all my different guns, while making sure that I landed a spin or a trick and balanced on a rail, it would just be way too much. And that balance is something that the Rollerdrome team had spent a lot of time getting just right in pre-production, in prototyping, before I ever joined the team. Combat requires line of sight for enemies to apply pressure and for the player to make plans. And if we really boil that point down, we can just say that the game design accommodates the genre blend, right? And at this point, a picture is forming quite clearly in my mind. Yes, Rollerdrome is a shooter, but it's not a game about precision aiming or managing excessive resources. And yes, Rollerdrome is a skater, but it's not a game about perfectly nailing tricks or extended trick combos. It's becoming clear to me over time that in Rollerdrome, the enemies are the challenge, and the skate elements are how you navigate between them. Rollerdrome is a game about closing the gap and looking like a badass while doing so. Oh my god, that's the name of the talk! What an incredible narrative has been spun to us this day. So yeah, my point is, Rollerdrome is essentially Doom on skates, but the act of blending the two has created something entirely new, with entirely new considerations for the design. This artwork is a custom commission from Kim, the Rollerdrome character concept artist. It's amazing. Her work is amazing. Check her out. So, now that we have done our due diligence, and we have a newfound appreciation for what we need to do for this game, let's revisit that plan that I made. We've established how essential line of sight is, right? And if I just stand around this level at various points, we can see huge portions of it are cut off by the elements I've added. And that was intentional, but if we look at that plan, the spec in the action list, we can identify these two elements. The level's too flat, the level's too open. These are based on massive assumptions that I've made, based on my past experience, sure, and my perception at the time, but they're just dead wrong. We've established that. Throw them out, we don't need them. After that, all that's really left is to sort the boxy feel and then general polish, and okay, that's kind of the task I was given in the first place, but whatever. Looking at the original draft against this one, it's clear I've got some wins, where I've opened up those sides. That really works. It feels much less enclosed, and that cool new entrance is a banger. Everyone's on board. That's good. From my draft, some of these alternate routes are working pretty well, pretty good for flow in the level. And where I'd put care into ensuring that these transfers between the islands worked both ways, that was really good. If I could expand that level wide and make it consistent, that would probably be enough, so long as I recapture and retain that simplicity and clarity from the initial draft, and actually remember to add enemy waves this time. And I haven't even mentioned collectibles or the second zone. But anyway, take the best bits of both, my new understanding, and we get this draft, which is very similar to the original layout. But you can see it's got some interesting extra options for transferring between the islands, and you can't really see this, but the space between the islands is being ever refined so that, Kara doesn't bonk her head so often. She keeps moving. The flow of the level keeps going. A few more iterations and a heavy dose of art magic, and we end up with this, 07 Mountain, the vertical slice version of the level. We did it. We made one level in a video game. So, let's summarize. Working in a new genre can be really hard, whether that's a new genre entirely or just something that's unfamiliar to you as a designer. My solution is to embrace the new. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. Here's the real detail. One trap I fell into is that I was really driven by my past experience. I took my assumptions from that and combined it with my knowledge of other skaters, other shooters. It ended up leading me astray. While this research and experience is super valuable, it should have taken a backseat to a more in-depth study of this new game right in front of me. My experience should have helped inform the design, sure, but not drive it. This next point, which is super important to me, level design extends beyond blockout, and despite being a huge proponent of this, I fell into that trap as well. What helps is to understand your process, formalize your process, and cross-reference your work against that process to ensure that you are taking everything into account. And finally, I was super fortunate that my studio had the patience to let me see this through. They had my back, and I gained a lot of valuable insight through making these mistakes. We're not computers, we're not AI, we are humans, so schedule in time to learn, and likewise have patience with new starters, even if they're senior, when they are starting work in a new genre. For Rollerdrome, all of this translates to embracing the blend, understanding that the game is more than the sum of its parts. It is a whole new beast. And an excuse to get that artwork up again. It's so good. Okay. It's an emotional journey. These next ones will be quicker. Receiving and actioning feedback. So, time has passed. I worked on another level. We don't have time to talk about that. 10 Canyon. We passed Vertical Slice. Hooray! And I'm given my next task, 08 Mall. So that's the 8th level in the game, Mall setting. It's actually going to be the second and final Mall level design for the game. The other Mall level is an early game level, grey box by Kev, and the art process for his level is beginning at the same time that I start blocking mine out. So I have all the benefit of that concept and art exploration work to go off while I get started on my block out. Now from the kickoff, the gist of the requirements for my level are that it is a mid to late game level, so players should know what they're doing by now. We can test them a little bit. And we want to integrate the Mall setting into the level, which I interpret as a desire to echo some of the key Mall-y features from the other Mall level. Things like these shootable billboards. You shoot it, it becomes a ramp. That's cool. Things like these escalator, travelator things, because this is the kind of thing you see in a mall, right? And balconies. The first level had inaccessible balconies higher up. What if my level had accessible balconies? Level design. We also go into this level with a set of mild fears from the design side. Namely, are our levels all regressing to the mean, becoming kind of samey? So far, due to those keep Kara moving design considerations, they're all some variant of this big open bowl, surrounded by quarter pipes on all sides, right? Different layouts, different shapes, different settings, but Is it just the same content repackaged? And from up high, there are also worries that we won't deliver on these key set-piece moments from the viral tweets that got this game going in the first place. Every player that liked and retweeted this stuff will have some version of the game in their head, right? We want to live up to that. We want to make an awesome experience for these players. We don't want to let them down. Oh well, whatever. I took a couple of weeks, and after some experimentation, made this top-down view. I had it in my head that I wanted to make this kind of classic arena-like symmetrical space. My reasoning being that malls are man-made. Man-made things are more likely to be symmetrical. Makes sense, right? This is a perfect opportunity. I also wanted my intent to be crystal clear. So I thought if I spent a bit more time, a couple of weeks, really nailing this concept before presenting it, it would help people to buy what I was selling. It features some innovative designs to address some of our fears, such as quarter pipes that push you to the edge of the level instead of into the middle. So instead of being a bowl, it's more like a bow tie. It also has those billboards, travelators, and balconies, sure. It also has these big cylindrical elevator shafts, which I hope provide a kind of cool wall ride transfer moment that, might work in a GIF or a tweet. I was into this level at the time and showed it to the designers. There were some cool lines here. So we showed it to the directors and art, and symmetry doesn't work. Straight up, repetitive, no landmarks. It's too gamey. And I'm like, oh, well, we can unsymmetrize it, the art will go in and they'll put shops around the edge and we can use them as landmarks. But a quick aside on this one. I wasn't really appreciating how fundamental this bit of feedback was at the time. Symmetry in Rollerdrome means players are essentially forced into doing the same lines, making the same moves no matter where they go in the level. It effectively strips players of choice, in direct opposition to this core pillar that we established earlier. Not good. Anyway, there's more feedback coming in. Doesn't look like a mall or anywhere earthly or human-made. And again, I'm like, listen, art will go in. They will put shops around the edge. It will look like a mall. Too much out of bounds, which is something I just haven't mentioned to you because it's really weird. But everything outside the playable space, everything now highlighted in red, is out of bounds, which means that if the player falls out of the level, which they do quite frequently in this layout, they get reset into the level and it really breaks the flow of gameplay. It's just kind of naff. But my intent here is that this is interesting negative space. The player can see an enemy, but they can't see a direct line to get there. It's interesting. Cool. In practice, maybe not so much. And no one actually mentioned this at the time, but that supposed GIF moment that I did with the elevator shaft is actually just a big rip-off of something I'd already done in 10 Canyon, the level we had to skip over. Arguably, I'd done it better there as well, so this wasn't an improvement or an innovation, just a poor imitation. Okay, well, I took all that feedback on board and recolored the out-of-bounds areas as if that will do anything, and I worked to break some of the symmetry in each corner. So even though the macro is still symmetrical, at least the options in each corner are different now. I also worked to literally inject one of those GIF moments into the thing, literally beat for beat. But the direction of the game has changed since Paul first made these GIFs, right? Trying to shoehorn them in like this really breaks the flow of gameplay. It doesn't really work. Changes aren't really cutting it. But if we look here, I've still got this super valid feedback and we've still got those initial requirements in the bank. So what do we do in that situation? That's right. We have a process. Sometimes you've got to climb back up that ladder, right? Back to the drawing board. Thankfully, the feedback I've had is really good, very direct and actionable. I've done the classic technique of showing people what they don't want so we can home in on what they do. The art lead points me again at the art brief, which includes a bunch of real-world mall plans, and an idea starts to form. We want this thing set in a mall. So I make up a mall-y intersection, some place where the concourses meet at a junction like this, and then I try and fit a level within it, just like they do in the real-world Rollerdrome sport. If Rollerdrome was real, it's like Monaco, right? We're taking over the city streets for a race. We're taking over malls and holiday chalets for a blood sport. But yeah, what if I retrofitted the existing functional space into a skate park / blood sport arena? Without tooting my own horn too hard, I don't need to elaborate on this level much more. This draft ticks all of the boxes. It looks like a skate park. It looks like a mall. It doesn't have a silly amount of out of bounds. It's definitely not symmetrical. It's got quarter pipes around the edge, but they're not continuous. You have to be paying a bit more attention as a player. It's a bit more technical to play. Further iterations just refine and polish this core concept. There's verticality, yes, but keeping it focused on one side and around the edges means it's not a line of sight blocker, but a series of deadly sniper perches, an exciting upper route for players to puzzle out. I think you can see the DNA of that draft very clearly in the end product. And oh, you want GIF moments? We'll make our own damn GIF moments. Yeah, this is probably my favorite level in the game. When I introduced that first new draft to the team, it really did go down a storm. And as you can tell, I am still very, very proud of this turnaround. How do we do it? The problem I have identified here is that no matter how long you're in the job, how many levels you make, they cannot all be bangers. Becoming comfortable with accepting feedback, learning how to interpret and action it goes a long way. I think that's something that we're all just working on all the time. So, in this case, what are my tips? 1, don't hide your intent like I did. Time box your proofs of concept, have conversations early, listen and learn from your team's past work. If I had said at the very start, oh, I want to make this kind of classic arena symmetrical like space, and actually listened when Paul said, no, that doesn't really work, it strips players of choice in Rollerdrome, probably could have saved us all a lot of grief. But if you do find yourself in that situation, don't be afraid to reset. Kill your darlings. Sometimes you got to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right, and just make a better baby. A lot of my best work has come from having the courage to wipe the slate clean. And finally, level designers, embrace the setting. I'm really guilty of this, but we all know in our heart of hearts that there's no such thing as just fix it in art. Let's put the work in, consider how our levels will sit in the world that we're designing them for, and the end result will be better for it every time. If you're struggling, talk to your fellow designers, talk to your environment artists. You're not alone. That's the real superpower of teamwork. Thanks, Sonic. Cool. Let's talk about how we actually build these levels. More time passes, and I get my next task, O2 Canyon. So second level in the game, Canyon biome this time. Now, as a reminder, this is what the first level looks like. It's an arena, it's round, it's compact, it's simple. But this is going to be a canyon level. Still early game, so we still want it to be simple, but not uniform. We want this to be naturalistic, undulating, canyony. A nice intro to the canyon setting for the player. Now this one was kind of the key image that I saw and I thought, yep, got it. And let me be honest, this was the smoothest level design process I've ever been through in my entire life, so let me whiz through. I drew some vague shapes to figure out a simple flow. This is genuinely what my planning step from earlier looks like. I thought, yep, that's a good one. Drew a few more of them. Made a quick and dirty grey box based off one of them. After this, it took, 3 iterations to really hit a solid base. And that honestly was kind of it. Just a buttload of smoothing it out and polishing up to get the final product before handing it over to art. Level design is easy. So, how do we actually build them? What about the tools? There are 4 kinds of levels in Rollerdrome. Arena, Mountain, Canyon, Mall, and we can kind of split them up by how they're made, spliny and kit piecey. And I'll start with the kit piece levels because they're simpler. So these are your skate park style levels, your mountains, and your malls. It's pretty much exactly what you imagine. We have a tool named the level design tool, and it covers a bunch of stuff, one of which being quick kit piece selection. Now, having a filterable palette like this is much quicker and more convenient than trawling through Unity's project view. You can see we can quickly snap pieces together with vertex snap, really quick. And I use simple pro builder shapes to fill in some of the gaps. You'll see that in a moment. It's worth noting that in Rollerdrome, ramps are just geometry. You can build something and Kara will just skate on it. But quarter pipes require special handling to make Kara behave properly on them. So how do we build our levels that call for less uniformity? That's right, I've spoiled it. Splines. The LD tool has a tab just for them. You just click a button and it gives you a spline with a generated mesh which follows that spline, so you can bend it around corners and all the other kind of spliny features. One cool thing that I will call out is this scale to ground feature that we had, excuse me, which vacuum forms the bottom of the mesh to the surface beneath it. This is incredibly valuable during development when Kara's character controller was extremely reliant on collision in the levels being smooth to prevent her from snagging, stopping, getting caught. Because spline objects are just an object in the hierarchy, you can stack multiple mesh generators to one spline. They all follow the same spline as you're about to see here. And combined with a bunch of advanced controls like that scale to ground feature, this meant once we were familiar with these tools, which we were by this point, you could prototype and iterate on some complex geometry really quickly. It was a really powerful tool set. If you're interested in more detail, we did a stream with Unity, which examines the tools, some rendering magic, and our automated testing pipeline. So check that out if it sounds like your jam. You can find it at jkmills.co.uk/rollerdrome. Since this is just going on YouTube, I will put the direct link in the description. If you do find yourself going to my website though, do pay attention to the .co.uk JacobMills.com is just some completely different guy. That guy is a juggler and a mime. Anyway, wrapping right around to the story of this level, O2 Canyon. The power of these tools is what enabled these quick iterations, right? But more than that, we intentionally left this early game level till later in development. It benefited not just from our deeper understanding of good design practice for this game, but also that deeper understanding of the tools that we had at this point. And that's evident in the construction of the level. The general structure is a few meshes built off of this one core spiral spline, which allows transitions like this to be seamless. You can also see the end of the spiral scales into the ground with total smoothness, which is super important, as I said, to prevent Kara from snagging. It's not all sunshine and roses, however. Every level had an awkward bit or 2 or 3 or 5, and not every transition can be smooth out of the box. What the hell is this thing? We ended up doing a lot of Pro Builder transitional pieces like this for the sake of collision, like I say, to eliminate steps, walls and snags, to stop Kara getting caught. But each of these would then require a custom art thing to go over the top of it. That's not the worst of all. Yes, excellent tools can and did empower designers, but the level creation pipeline doesn't end with design, right? Far from it. If the fruits of that labor don't have an art-friendly result, if the tools don't empower the artists in the same way, you're going to have a bad time. And sadly, that is a trap that we fell into in Rollerdrome. You'd hope, looking at this, knowing how it's made, that you could snap your fingers and BAM! Swap out some textures and materials, and the splines have done all the hard work. And in the distant past, that was the plan. But as we built these levels, the results just did not hit the level of visual fidelity that we wanted, right? And you know when you're making stuff and you're using tools and something's just a little bit awkward, but you find a workaround, so you make do because you know there are bigger issues to deal with and it's not so bad really, and the coders are busy and we don't want to be a bother. Before you know it, that little snowball can roll and grow and become this big old avalanche, right? Chase you down a mountain on a snowboard. So Art ended up remaking not just these awkward merger pieces, they ended up remaking pretty much every spline object in every level, remade them in Maya, imported them back into the levels, not a small task, it bears in the ass later, cover it in the takeaways. So, firstly, the problem, early game levels need to be shit hot. There's a million games that have used this technique, so just file this down as another successful case study, but it works. Leaving this level till later in development meant, yes, we understood the game's design requirements more, we could onboard players better, but also, crucially, we benefited from the expertise gained from the extended use of our level building tools. Great. Those tools really did empower us as designers. It really works. Taking the time early on to make a suite of tools that let us quickly try ideas and iterate in this new genre paid dividends throughout development. Again, jkmills.co.uk/Rollerdrome, or the link in the description if you want more detail on the tools. But sadly, the tools did not do the same for the artists. They had to burden more work than they should have. It led to more brittle final levels and made it harder for us as designers to fix bugs later on without hassling the artists even more. So like I say, they remade all of these things in Maya, imported them back in the levels. That meant late on, when we got bugs, it was very difficult for designers to just go in and fix those bugs. A lot of the times we would have to put that burden back on the artists. Not good, too brittle. We identified this whole thing through retrospectives, which Roll7 runs fairly regularly. And for our next project, as a result of those retrospectives, we're hoping to include tech art and tools coders in our regular design art catch-ups, hoping that more eyes on the process earlier on means that we can identify problems sooner and properly prioritize fixes. I realize this may sound like a production issue outside the remit of a designer, but I disagree. Being a designer for me means being a caretaker or a champion for a piece of content from inception all the way to delivery. So whatever we can do to grease the wheels of production will only help our design work shine in the end. Okay, storming through. Let's talk about design block. This will be fun. So, more time passes. Not much time this time. The design phase for 2 Canyon really was lightning fast. And I move on to 11 Arena. Again, the 11th level in the game, Arena biome. Now, the prior two arenas in the game were already in a good state. The biome already had this really strong identity, right? In the lore, they're custom built for the sport of Rollerdrome. They're like velodromes mixed with skate parks, mixed with blood death arenas. But they are simple, uniform, and elegant in design and construction. And after the process for O2 Canyon went so smoothly, I was feeling pretty good heading into this one. Well, a few considerations. First, it's my first time making an arena biome level. As I say, the prior two were in good shape all the way back when I joined the team. They already had these in the bank. This isn't just the final level that I will make for the game. It's actually the final level in the game. So it's got to be good, right? It's got to hit all those last level markers. It's got to be challenging and memorable. So, you know, no pressure. I looked at a lot of Velodrome reference. I looked at the previous two arena levels. One was a bowl. One was a Velodrome. What if I put a bowl inside of a Velodrome? And that's what you're seeing here, right? Okay. It's kind of happy Cyclops. I showed it to the team, and the feedback was good, actually. There's the seed of an idea here. It's simple, but that's good. That fits the setting. But I'll be completely honest, I didn't like what I was making. I didn't have any faith in it. I really did have design block, which I'm defining just like writer's block, right? Just this brick wall in the creative process. So how do we counter it? Well, I don't know about you, but at first I kind of flail around a bit. I tried some completely different stuff, spent some time doing that, including this happy koala face, but I'm still not feeling this. This doesn't look like a constructed space. Maybe with more polish it could be something, but no. Asking for feedback, the team could see the potential for these ideas, but it's clear they are not fully formed yet. I feel the same way. Spent some more time experimenting, leveraging that hard-fought tool expertise, right? And came up with this, a weird shape. But I like the potential of this. It's unique. It looks deliberate. It looks built and constructed. It provides some options for the player. So maybe a few more days and the weird shape forms the basis of this Waluigi draft. Trying to be compact. I'm trying to give players the opportunity to get air on the weird shape. The south end is kind of tagged on, but whatever. I try another version of this. Realize that I've fallen into the symmetry trap once again. So work to unsymmetrize it. Make an asymmetrical fun box and an asymmetrical quarter pipe on the south end. And there's something here now, right? It's a uniform arena shape, sure, but without being a bowl or a velodrome like the other levels. It's more like an egg. It's got some interesting elements. There are lots of opportunities for getting air on the weird shape. We've got the first draft of this upper outside route, which at this point is just floating rails, but you know, there's a concept there. And boost pads, nice to see them. They exist. I haven't seen them for a while in any of the other levels. There's something here. But again, the feedback I'm getting is that we're not there yet. The level's got two distinct ends, sure, but players mostly end up sticking around the weird shape on the north end. And this is symmetrical, and we know that doesn't work. There's this kind of tangle of problems with this level that's hard to identify. What I could really use is some time to let this sit and churn in the background. And it really is lucky that I got O2 Canyon done so quick, because just getting to this point on 11 Arena has taken ages. But luckily, and despite these impending deadlines, I do have time. Because this nice simple timeline doesn't actually show you the full picture. I have been deceiving you this entire presentation. The level production schedule actually looked like this. Which makes sense, right? Real life isn't neat. But if we focus in on just this level, this is where we are. And yes, it's the end of the grey box phase, but don't fear. It's followed by a few weeks of playtest, where the level gets played by all of us, maybe externally, but mostly at this point within the team. And that's followed by FB for feedback, which is more time to grey box, time to implement the feedback that we generate during the playtest phase. While that playtest phase is ongoing for this level, I'll be focused on some other level, in this case just the boss zone that actually follows this arena. But every level's schedule was laid out like this, with alternating implementation and playtesting phases. So the processes that I've been describing weren't as linear as presented. For a lot of production, there'd be 3 levels living in my head, all at various stages of development, but my focus would always be on one in particular, the one right in front of me. So at this point, I actually did have a few weeks to work on something else entirely, while the knot of problems with 11 Arena just slowly untangled in my head. So let's fast forward 3 weeks. We're in the feedback phase, and we've all played this draft a bunch, and we all have a much better idea and a much better understanding of why we're not vibing for it. Yeah, the north half is symmetrical, we know that. The boost pads actually keep you locked into a path. They don't encourage player choice at all. There's a reason we haven't used them like this in other levels. This quarter pipe I put in on the south end on the fun box doesn't actually lead you anywhere, just into a wall. And yeah, these are good starting points, but I've been thinking a lot on what's worked before and what I can integrate into this design. Let's do it. First off, let's take what we had and just squish it together a bit. Add the alcove from 06 Arena to break some of that symmetry, thanks Kev, and then rotate the fun box that I added so that the quarter pipe actually goes somewhere into that new alcove. And that's pretty much what this draft is, right? And it's starting to really feel like something now. These problems are starting to get solved. We are homing in on it. These new rounder elements really fit the arena setting, so let's expand upon that. And finally swallow the pill that the weird shape has served its purpose. Rest in peace. We swap it out instead for this tiny fun box, which means we have finally broken the last vestiges of symmetry once and for all. The spirit of the weird shape does live on, however, in the next draft, where I introduce this little turd as an asymmetrical counterpart to the tiny fun box, and, combined with getting a good version of that potential upper route that we first thought about so long ago, baby, we got a stew going. We did it. We've made a level. Design block beaten. So let's jump into the takeaways and examine the useful bits of that process. Now, I've boiled this down, the key points, to narrow the possibility space and utilize the team that you have and the time that you have. What do I mean? Narrow the possibility space. What I mean here is identifying some restrictions to work within so that you aren't just stuck staring at the blank page. For example, where does this content sit in the game? What levels come before and after this one? Or if we're in an open world, for example, what surrounds this zone? Do we want to build on what came before? Contrast it? Subvert it? What lessons have we learned before? Is there a key learning that we can take and use as a requirement for this level? And in the same vein, what's worked well in other levels? What can we steal and rework for this situation? In this case, the key examples are, looking at what came before, levels 9 and 10 actually have really big footprints. Maybe we can contrast that and make this level more compact? What lessons have we learned? Reject symmetry, don't fall into that trap again. And we know from experience that compact footprints, at this point, make for more difficult Rollerdrome levels. They really let the area denial enemies shine, make it very stressful for the player. So that compactness point has come up twice. Maybe it's worth listening to. And that's why the first step I did was squish the footprint down, right? And then what's worked elsewhere? The alcove from 06 Arena, the balconies from the mall, the spirit of what I was trying with the previous iterations, with the weird shape. These all played a factor in the final version. Alright, next point is utilize team and time. The team had my back, and that was so essential for seeing this level through. I received good feedback on every iteration from various members of the team, not just designers, and that's super important. I do mean utilize the entire dev team. For example, some people were not sold on this little turd when it was just in grey box, but get a cheeky paint over of it and bam, you can put those fears to rest. But expanding on that theme, remember that design does extend beyond blockout. You can share the load of what you're trying to achieve with other elements of the game. We want the final level to be epic, climactic. Art is going to do a huge amount selling that. And we know layout is important. I've spent a lot of time focusing on that. We know at this point how vital an ingredient the enemies are in Rollerdrome. They're going to pull a massive amount of weight in making this final level challenging and memorable. Maybe I didn't need to put so much pressure on the layout. Maybe I could have leaned on these other elements as well. Final point, utilizing the time that I had was equally vital. Working on some iterations and then having time to let that percolate in the back of my brain before coming back to it was a huge help. So schedule it in. Talk to your leads, talk to your producers. Install some whiteboards next to your toilet. I don't know. Anyway, conclusions. We'll just round out the story. This is the end. More time passes. The team and I do a bunch of that really unsexy end of project work. And eventually, the game is released. We did it! We made a video game. And then we won a BAFTA! Oi oi. Alright, thank you for indulging me at home. So this is what you've been waiting for. When we were in the room, I would wait for people to take a picture of this. So while we do that, I will say some of the main points. Embrace the new. In this case, figuring out that although Rollerdrome is a skater yes and a shooter yes, the end result is something entirely new, right? At its core, it is a game about closing the gap, and formalizing my process and using that as a cross-reference was essential for me figuring that out. Accept and action feedback. Remember, there is no such thing as just fix it in art. Do embrace the real superpower of teamwork. And when building levels, schedule in early game ones for later in development. Spend time on your tools so they empower everyone on the team. And finally, when confronted with design block, beat the fear of a blank page by narrowing the possibility space and utilizing the team that you have and the time that you have to get the best results. Thank you very much for sticking with me, if you did, the video, so you could have skipped through. Thank you to all these people. Thank you, Roll7. Thank you to Osama for shepherding me through the GDC process. And thank you to Andrew for poking me and prodding me to apply for these things in the first place. Incredible opportunity. So, cool. At this point, I would then, ask if people had any questions. You're not in the room with me, so you can't do that. But if you want to leave a question, do comment on the YouTube video. You can find me at Jacob W. Mills. I don't have that on screen because my Twitter really is a lot of shit posting and memes, really, as opposed to game development content. But I am obsessed with it while it's still around. So, reach out on there. Feel free. I'm also on LinkedIn and all that stuff. But yeah, cool. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye.